Welcome to another edition of the Hawk Off the Press podcast. I'm your host, Gazette Hawkeyes reporter John Steppe. I am excited to be joined by Pat Lanni from NJ Advanced Media covering Rutgers. Pat, thanks for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So let's start off with quarterback for Rutgers. Iowa certainly has had its own quarterback question marks. It seems like Rutgers has some question marks there too, just for different reasons.
Yeah, it's like so hard for me to talk about and explain this in under 30 seconds. So I'll try to be concise with this, but I could really spend 25 minutes talking about this because it's been one of those ongoing circuses, if you will. So the concise version of it for you Iowa fans out there is this: they're down to one scholarship quarterback available. That's Evan Simon. He played last week against Temple and struggled a bit at times as the offense really struggled. So Evan Simon's listed probably as the go-to guy to start Saturday. Noah Vedral, who was the starter the last 2 years, has been working his way back from a training camp injury. He's a quote unquote game time decision. And the promising youngster Gavin Wimsatt, who many thought would be the guy this year, got hurt in the Temple game last week, and he's also a game time decision. So to put it concisely, look for Evan Simon. And like I said, last week, the offense struggled a little bit under his direction. So if you're a Hawkeye fan, that's probably good news.
And this seems to be a Rutgers offense that likes to run the ball a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what was so concerning last week. They were really good running the ball against Boston College, and then Wagner, you take it for what it was, playing an FCS team. But the offensive line took a step back, I would say, last week. And it's been a bit of a concern of how the offensive line is going to play. And they've certainly restructured it a little bit this season, and they've gotten bigger through the transfer portal. But, matching up against Iowa defensive line, I think, is certainly going to be a concern.
It's funny, this is probably sounding a little familiar to Iowa listeners. Quarterback question marks, issues with the offensive line that are keeping them from being able to run the ball. It does seem like they have some talent, though, at wide receiver.
Well, interesting you say that. I mean, they do have a lot of receivers, but they're still looking for the guy. And I think a lot of that has been constricted with what's happening at quarterback, right? So it's a chicken or the egg situation. Do you have receivers? Do you have a quarterback? Can you not get them the ball? Are they getting open? It's hard to say, but I'd say Rutgers is deep at receiver, but they don't have a guy like I think Iowa just got their guy back, right?
Yeah, they got one of theirs with Nico Reganey, and Keegan Johnson looked like he was me back, and then, oh wait, maybe not. We found out this week.
Yeah. So, I mean, Rutgers has a long list of receivers, and they thought they had a really good number one receiver coming in from Syracuse, this guy, Taj Harris. And he was Syracuse's top receiver 2 years ago and put up some gaudy numbers, really. But he left the program 2 weeks ago. And that's kind of raised all of these different question marks. So there's a void at receiver, quarterback question marks, and really just an offensive step back last week. So I think Rutgers is coming into this game 3-0, but with a lot of question marks. But on the flip side, I'm sure we're going to get there and talk about defense in this game, right? Like,
oh yes,
a record-setting low over/under is certainly something to not look forward to, I guess, right? For the fans, like, you don't want to see another 7-3 game, but I think
unless you really appreciate good defense and good special teams, which we'll get to too. If you love defense and special teams,
this is your game.
But you don't play golf and football. It's not the lowest score wins.
Yeah, I think both teams want that this week, though. We'll try to win a 2-0 game.
Iowa already has seen 7-3 with two safeties and a field goal. So
was that your newspaper, by the way, that had they took out the O's?
Yes, it was.
In the headline. That was one of the best things I saw all year.
Thank you. I wish I could take credit. We have some great sports copy editors / designers who came up with that. And when I saw that, I just died laughing there.
Same.
My pick'em for the Iowa-Nevada game was that this is the best chance for Iowa to put the O back in Iowa.
Yeah.
Which they did with 27 points, but we'll see against this Rutgers defense, which is a great segue here into what should Iowa fans expect. Let's start off with the defensive line.
All right, I'm gonna hit you with a stat that probably is gonna shock you guys. Rutgers ranks first in the FBS in rush yards allowed per game.
Wow,
32.3. And a lot of that success has stemmed from the defensive line, which has been really, really good so far. So Boston College came in as a passing team, so not a lot of success on the ground, which is weird for Boston College, but still Rutgers shut down that run game really well. Wagner, you play in FCS, it was totally lopsided, so you get to pad the stats there a little bit, but they also held Temple to under 35 yards a game, 35 yards last week. So Rutgers has been great against the run. Defensive line has been really good. The emergence of Wesley Bailey, he's a sophomore, has been promising. And this guy, Aaron Lewis, who we agreed on our podcast this week, has been kind of their team MVP through the first 3 weeks. He had 11 tackles, a forced fumble last week. So look out for number 71. That's Aaron Lewis, and Wesley Bailey on the defensive line.
And then what about linebackers?
Okay. When you go through training camp and you're like, all right, what's the number one biggest concern for Rutgers? It was who the heck is going to play linebacker, because they lost three to the end, or three to graduation, 3 starters to graduation, and we're really thin. Rutgers made kind of national news when they were trying to get this guy, Drew Singleton, back. He was declared for the NFL draft and took an agent, but got hurt in that whole Gator Bowl situation when they got into the game on like 5 days notice. So they tried to apply for a hardship. Anyway, lost the appeal. Long-winded answer of saying they had no depth at linebacker, really big question marks. But one of the surprises so far is that how well Tyreen Powell and Deion Jennings have stepped up for Rutgers at linebacker. They've been playing great, and a big part of the reason why they're stuffing the run so well, and playing great at linebacker. So defense overall at Rutgers has kind of been just like Iowa, like really, really the reason why they're winning games.
32.3, you said, right?
Yeah, rush yards per game.
Wow. Obviously, that might change going into Big Ten by the time Big Ten play is done. But
no
to be that low, even for a 3-game stretch.
For Rutgers to rank number 1 in FBS in anything has to surprise a lot of people, right? So it's certainly early, and you're right. Competition is what it is through 3 games in the non-conference, but that's when Schiano had his best teams at Rutgers. That was always it: play the run really well and run the ball really well. So yeah, it's been a great stat, and the defense. And here's the other one that people lose track of is how good Rutgers has been forcing turnovers and not turning the ball over. They have not turned the ball over. They haven't put it on the ground. They've thrown a few interceptions, but haven't fumbled. And they're 9-0 when they don't turn the ball over in Schiano's tenure. So that's going to be the key to the game for me.
And it's sounding very familiar to Iowa. Iowa, a team that really thrives, you could say, when they are able to win the turnover margin. They've thrived from being able to limit the run. So it's interesting to see how it's almost like the Iowa's Big Ten East doppelganger here.
You're so right. And I think Schiano was so complimentary of Kirk Ferentz this week in his press conference, just about the way that he coaches and the establishment of a program for so long. Like, that's what Schiano wants to build, like a team that is consistently good defensively, a team that doesn't make mistakes, and a team that's just really well coached. I think what you're seeing at this season at Rutgers is a young team that's just building towards that and using Iowa kind of as a model for success. Like, if there's a program that Rutgers wants to be, there's no question it's Iowa.
And it's funny that you bring that up with what Schiano said in his press conference, because Kirk then in his press conference was very complimentary of what he's been doing at Rutgers and saying that they're playing with an identity. So it's interesting how this matchup, it seems to be a lot of mutual respect between these two coaches.
Yeah, I think they're both really good coaches and obviously have had success in many ways. Like obviously Shiano's where he took this program from to now is even a great story.
And then the one defensive position group we haven't talked about yet, defensive backs. What does this Rutgers secondary look like?
Very experienced, and on paper, one of their better position groups. They play a lot of 4-2-5, but maybe that changes against a rushing team like Iowa. But they're using a safety, Christian Isian, kind of as a in the box safety, more of a run stuffer than like a coverage guy at safety. So at cornerback, they've had a really good emergence from Robert Longerbeam. He's a sophomore. And then on the other side, Max Melton, who some say is probably their most talented player and best NFL prospect. So cornerback's good. Safety, you got a couple experienced guys there, and they're using Christian Isian as kind of a flex, like a hybrid kind of safety linebacker position.
Another thing where Iowa fans are thinking, okay, they're a little used to seeing a 4-2-5 themselves.
Yeah. Okay. That's how Iowa plays.
Yeah, it's technically, they call it cash, where they put in that fifth safety oftentimes, but then they'll oftentimes against more run heavy teams go into 4-3. So it's either the Leo or the cash that they have that kind of adjusts it from a 4-3 to a 4-2-5. But against passing teams, which we're seeing more and more of, it's a lot of 4-2-5.
Right. Yeah, I know but when you get a Rutgers versus Iowa game, maybe this is the time we see something different from Rutgers and both teams really. But I don't know. Like I said, linebacker depth is definitely an issue at Rutgers. So if you're Iowa, that's probably what you want to exploit.
And then I can't go without talking about the most important position battle of this week, punter.
Okay. Yeah. Are you writing a story about this? Because I'm writing a story about this.
I am writing a story about
fantastic.
This. I'm writing a story the same day that we're recording this.
Oh, fantastic.
So, yes. I think everyone is going to be writing a punting story by the time this game happens.
Yeah. How could you not? So your guy's an Australian, right?
Yes. Both from Melbourne, Australia.
Okay. Fantastic. All right. Let's not steal each other's angles. So let's not try to dive into this one too deep. But yeah, our guy, Adam Korsak from Melbourne, Australia, he was a Ray Guy finalist last year. Really talented guy. He had an awesome game against Iowa. I want to say it was 20 or 20
or 19.
Yeah, 2018, right? Yeah. And that was really like his coming out. Wow. Like, oh my God. I think he pinned 5 inside the 5 and 1 bounced all the way to the 1. So yeah, I listened to, I guess they had it on BTN, Your Punter, after that 7-3 game. And someone in the audience was like, well, what are you going to do now? Or something. He had some great quotes. I don't know if you remember them.
Yeah. Like, and the funny thing too is like Torrey has a sense of humor about things too.
Yeah.
He had one comment this week about how, because somebody was asking that he's been able to pin a lot of guys inside the 20, especially this year. Last year, there were a decent number of touchbacks, and some of that was injuries to people who are at gunner, but he's really been great at pinning guys inside the 20, inside the 10, oftentimes. And somebody asked about how much did Australian rules football help? And he said something like, I'll sound maybe like a smart ass saying this, but it's not really that difficult. Yeah. Was the gist of what he was saying. Right. And we're seeing it both with Torrey and with Adam.
Yeah.
Where they head to the Big Ten, and both teams have really benefited from their field position advantage.
There's no question. Like Korsak was Rutgers MVP last season. plain and simple, right? Like it has to be said. And this season, he didn't get to punt again against Wagner, right? Because Rutgers didn't punt, but he's been obviously the master. Our columnist wrote a huge long profile about how he actually does the punting and called him the punting Picasso. And that was perfect. That was perfect.
Well, if you're a punting fan, this could be like a trip to an art museum then.
Yeah, exactly. Or if you're an Australian trying to get into like college football, you got two guys to root for.
Yeah. Australia, everyone there is probably rooting for like a 0-0. No, it'll be like a 4-2 game with all safeties.
Yeah. 3 safeties.
Iowa's already seen a game with 2, so only need to add 1 more.
Absolutely.
And then in terms of field goal kicking, that's probably going to be an important area of this game as well, with just the strength of these 2 defenses. Iowa made the switch to Drew Stevens, a true freshman. Things seemed to work out pretty well for him in his first game kicking field goals. What is Rutgers' situation there at that position?
So Rutgers kicker Jude McAtamney, another fascinating story. They got this guy out of Ireland, and also through the same kind of it's called Pro Kick Australia. I'm not sure if your guy's from that program as well. Yeah. I think he is, right? So Jude McAtamney played D2 football last year. Rutgers pulled him out of the portal. Really strong leg. He had a 49-yarder last week. But he's missed a kick in every game so far, whether it was an extra point or a short. Like he's been really good from far and just inaccurate from like under 30 yards, which is, I think, maybe just jitters or something. But I think he's a legitimately good kicker with a bright future.
A little counterintuitive, where the longer field goals have been easier than the chip shots.
Right. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but maybe just first couple game jitters. Yeah.
Well, do you have a score prediction yet?
Well, listen, we did I'll plug our podcast, the Rutgers Rant. If you guys want to give it a listen, we did a little bit of a Iowa preview, and somehow I talked myself into a Rutgers win. And the reason why was because Rutgers hasn't had an awesome night crowd rockin' stadium in a few years, just because of how down the program has been. And I think that the way these 2 teams mirror each other, and I think when you factor in the turnovers, and of course Iowa protects the ball really well and the defense is so good, but I think Rutgers just mirrors that so well. And you get into one of these fourth quarter games that Rutgers has the chance to steal this one. And a 4-0 start for Rutgers is a dream. So I took Rutgers in our podcast. I'm going to put it in print in the newspaper on Saturday. And I'm going to put it here on the Hawk Off the Press podcast. I'm going to go Rutgers 17, Iowa 14, and the under.
I think everyone's going with the under. I don't think there's any doubt about that these teams aren't going to combine to score. I think it moved up to 35.
Oh, my God.
I was thinking, man, that's like an easy under there. Like, take your money right there from the bank and throw it at that. So I think this could be a game that I think Iowa fans might overlook because it's Rutgers, and obviously Rutgers has a reputation of not being the most competitive in the Big Ten ever since they joined the conference. But this could be a pesky team. That being said, I think Iowa has the talent advantage in a couple different positions. Defense has been outstanding. We'll see in terms of offensive line. I think that's a major question mark. They need to have some improvement there against a team that's not Nevada. And even against Nevada, if you take out the 2 big running plays, the 40-yard and 55-yard touchdowns skewed the yards per carry a little bit. So I'm saying right now, Iowa 16, Rutgers 7. And if anyone's wondering how I get to 16, that'd be 1 touchdown and 3 field goals. As tempting as it would be to say like 2 field goals and 5 safeties. Yeah, way on the under there.
Yeah. So, all right, we agree on the under. We agree on the potential for safeties in this game. We just disagree on our final prediction, which for me, of course, I was the the outlier on our podcast. Everyone else went with Iowa, but I went with the homer pick this week. So,
well, good to be a contrarian sometimes.
yes, absolutely. I got to get back in the race. We have a little competition, and I gave one back last week, so I'm hoping not to give another one back.
See, I got ahead a little bit because I was brave enough to pick Iowa State over Iowa as the Iowa beat writer and got that one right. But then I had a little too much confidence in Northern Iowa last week. So yeah, I need to pick up some ground here, but I don't think Iowa-Rutgers is gonna be where I'm gonna pick up that ground. So
yeah, right.
Well, Pat, thanks for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me. This was a blast, and we'll see you in Jersey.
Yes. And thanks to our listeners for tuning into another episode. I'll be back with another episode after the game. Until then, we will talk Hawks later.